Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. Shall we get started? First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Eric Malice. I am the co-founder of National Test Systems, and I'm also the Chief Product Officer. So we've got a little over 20 years, probably a little more than that, in this business. And ever since my brother and I started this company, back in early 2000, he was always very good at business. He knew how to do sales. He knew how to manage inventory. He knew how to manage bookkeeping, all the things I had zero interest in. But what I found interesting was all the technical, all the science, all the interesting, to me, all the interesting side of things. I don't want to make phone calls all day to try and sell drug tests. So I'd rather learn everything I could about how they work, how the drugs work, how they interact with the body, how metabolites work, all that stuff, everything clinical toxicology, but especially as it relates to what we're doing, to drug testing. So that's really always been my focus. And what it does is it allows me to provide you guys with some of this knowledge that I've accumulated over my 20 plus years. And that's hugely important. Listen, we're selling a product that is they're not paper towels, they're not bed linens. This is a product that needs some expertise. You need some backup on this. You want somebody who's done the homework, who knows how these things work and kind of give you a better explanation of how these things, you're using them every day. The more you know about them, the more it's going to make your daily drug testing duties a little bit easier, or at least a little bit more insightful. So with this in mind, we create these webinars for you, these educational webinars, where we hope to share some of the knowledge that we've accrued over the years. And that's really hugely important. I mean, aside from the whole, paper towels, bed linens thing, we're not just here to sell you a cup. We're here to support you guys. Anyone can send you a cup. You can go to eBay and buy drug testing cups. Try calling them with a question and see who, that's a little bit different. So we'd rather take the other tack. We'd rather spend our efforts, our money, our time, making sure we educate you to the best of our ability. And by the turnout here today, it's to some extent you guys agree with me. So that's great. That makes my day. When I see a fair amount of people coming to the webinars, listen, fentanyl, we're going to get 200 people every time. 100 people is great. That's a lot of people who want to spend 20 minutes, half an hour of their afternoon and learn something a little bit more about what they're doing every day. So we thank you for that. So we've got about 15, 20-minute webinar, after which we will have a section for question and answers if we need. If you look on the left side of your screen, you'll see people, then questions below that. If you have a question, go ahead and type it into the question tab. I'm not actually going to address the questions until I finish the presentation, but you can plug in your question whenever. You'll get in line. Just know if for some reason we run long and we're not able to get to everybody's questions today, just know your consultant will be reaching out in the next couple of days, and obviously they'll answer any questions that we might have missed. They'll also give you an opportunity to choose a subject in the next webinar or a future webinar. They'll give you an opportunity to have a one-on-one training with you and your staff, either on this subject or another subject that makes sense. As you'll see, and lastly, if you have colleagues that were hoping to make it but weren't able to make it, we typically post the recording of this webinar within a day or two after its completion. So reach out to me, leave a comment, and we'll make sure we get you a link. So anyone who might have wanted to be here, wasn't able to get here, they'll be able to catch up on this subject as well. Now, again, we have 15 to 20 minutes. This is a very deep subject, and what we try to do on these, instead of keeping you here all day, you've got a job to do, I've got a job to do, you don't have all day for me, at least not with me inviting you into my house and then making you stay all day. So we do kind of a shallow dive and explore a little bit of each aspect of the subject. And I'll point out along the way, these are great subtopics if you really want to get a deeper dive. You want a deeper dive on any aspect of what we're talking about today. That would be a great excuse to schedule a one-on-one training. And we will take that deep dive, because then you're inviting me into your house and you've got to kick me out when you're tired of me. So be happy to do it, though. Be happy to do it. Just serve cookies. That's all I ask. So what are we talking about today? Today we are going to discuss kratom, or as some like to pronounce it, kratom. Now, first, when we first started talking about this substance, when it started gaining popularity, I was a stickler. I said, no, it's kratom, no, it's kratom. And then I found enough times where I was corrected phonetically that I said, you know what, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to wash my hands of the whole thing. So kratom, tomato, tomato, either way, we're talking about the same thing. We're going to talk about the usage. We're going to talk about its unique effects, because it has very unique effects. It's a very unique substance. And then we're also going to discuss its legal status. So first of all, what is it? What is kratom? Kratom is a flowering shrub. It's a tropical tree in the coffee family, and it's native mainly to Southeast Asia. We're talking about Thailand, Malaysia, Myanmar, or Burma. I always forget which is the more recent name they use. But kratom is basically the leaves of this Mitragyna speciosa tree. And again, it's native to Southeast Asia. And as we'll discuss as we go on, it has very, very unique properties that may lend itself well to positive outcomes down the road. Again, we'll dig deeper into that as it goes. So really, it's been a traditional medicine in Thailand and Southeast Asia since about the early 19th century, which is about the early 1800s. Now, in the grand scheme of things, where herbs or natural drugs are concerned, it's a fair newcomer. We talk about things like psilocybin mushrooms. They've been in use for 2,000 years. We talk about things like, cannabinoids. They've been in use for 5,000 years. Cocaine, probably 4,000 years. So this one, as far as that goes, is a relative newcomer. But basically, people in those days would chew on the leaves, and it would give a stimulating and a pain-relieving effect. And we'll get into how that's also makes this a unique substance. And then we followed through some legality issues, bringing us to 2024, where it remains federally legal in the United States, although it's been banned in several municipalities and counties and that sort of thing. And again, we'll dig deeper into that as well. So how is it used? Basically, it is consumed in various forms. There's a lot newer forms that we're seeing come out more and more as time goes by. So typically you see it as a whole leaf, either a green leaf still living or a dried leaf. More often that dried leaf is crushed into a powder, and then most often that powder is put into capsules. Those are probably the most common ones that you see, and you can look in the photo here and you see it's a lot of big bags of powder and a lot of big bags of capsules. This is another one of those gas station dopes, by the way. This is what you're going to see on your shelf if you're not in one of the places that's banned it. This is what you'll see on your shelf next to the TNFT, next to Zaza Red. You'll see it next to all the CBD products, the Delta 8, the Delta 10s. And there's usually at least 5 shelves, at least if me in South Florida is anything to go by. Any little convenience store I walk into, any vape store I walk into, there's just a wall of different kratom products. And it really is crazy how many different formats they've come to. We're now seeing teas. You can get the powder basically in a tea bag. We're seeing a lot more liquid extracts. And with that also comes concentrates. And I'll get to that in a second. And then with the concentrates, we also see gummies. So you have a chew like you would for CBD or you would for THC. So the problem with the concentrate. So concentrate, when you think about it, they take the active ingredient and they basically dry as much water out of it as possible. So now they have a much more concentrate, a lot more active ingredient, a much smaller space. The problem without having any real legislation or any real oversight is there's no independent laboratory verification that this 5 times concentrate is really 5 times the strength that it once was. So it's all these things, because it's so loosey-goosey, you almost can't really trust the label because they don't know either in most cases. But it's definitely available almost everywhere and very open space in most little head shops, as they like to call them. Excuse me. One good news is we have not found any evidence that it can be smoked or vaporized yet. I've read stories about people who try putting the powdered kratom into their, to their e-cigarette or something like that. There is no indication that I can find that would actually have any effect whatsoever. So people may try to, maybe trying to do it, but it doesn't seem to be any success that I've been able to verify. If you heard, anytime, by the way, anytime I tell you that I have not been able to find proof, if you've got a story, even if it's anecdotal, please let me know, because it's at least worth me chasing down to see if there's any, if there's any truth to it. So I'm always looking for tips. Don't forget that. I always am looking for tips. We rely on you a lot, by the way, to tell us what's going on in your neighborhood. And we're talking about kratom today because it's probably the most asked about substance in the past 6 months or so. So when we start getting calls, a lot of different people in a lot of different geographical regions are asking about this same substance. It's going to be our next webinar because it's what's important to people. So rely on your tips. Keep them coming. We love it. Thank you very much. So I mentioned before that it has very unique effects. So kratom produces stimulant effects at low doses. It can be like a mood enhancer, stimulant like caffeine, wakes you up a little bit, gives you a burst of energy. That's typically at about a 3-gram dosage. We're talking about powdered leaf here. When it gets up to about a 5-gram dosage, then it actually has sedative effects. In other words, makes you sleepy, brings like a downer, causes drowsiness. In that form, it's also an excellent pain reliever. And then also in that, it's going to bring about the euphoric feeling that a lot of drug seekers are looking for when they're taking drugs at all. So that's very unique in that it has 2 different levels of effects based on the amount that you take, which they're still studying. And there's really no known mechanism of action for that yet. But because it's come into our popularity so recently, a lot of these possible treatments and possible medications are very, very early in their research. We're just like, oh, we better look at this. We're getting reports that. And again, like I rely on you guys, a lot of times the science relies on the users in the street telling them, hey, this is what it does to me when I take it. Maybe you could look into that. And they do. And sometimes it brings about some excellent, forward progress, basically. Excuse me. And much like other substances, like with cannabinoids, there's different strains. You'll hear about red leaf, green vein. Haven't been able to find any support that this is anything more than a marketing ploy or possibly just a different species or subspecies of kratom. But all reports that I can find, they basically all do the same thing. You might talk to the guy behind the counter, say, oh, the white vein's great for pain relief. The red vein's good for relaxation or sleep. But they don't really know that to be sure yet. So there's that. And then when I say it's a unique opioid, this is really interesting to me. So basically, let me give you a quick idea of the way that opioids work in your body. So the way and I'm going to give you a very stripped down layman version, oversimplified. So if you're sciencey, don't come at me later, because I know I'm making it simple. So basically, your body has opioid receptors. You got your mu opioid receptors in the brain, which is the ones we talk about the most. You also have opioid receptors in your gut and other parts of your body. To give you an idea, the opioid receptors in your brain are typically what we associate with an opioid euphoric effect. You take a Vicodin that your dentist gave you and you feel all loopy. That's the mu receptors in your brain. There's also opioid receptors in your gut. For example, there's an anti-diarrheal called Imodium. I don't know if anyone has ever had diarrhea and taken over-the-counter Imodium. Well, it contains an opioid called loperamide. And this loperamide is an opioid, but it is one that happens to focus much more strongly on the opioid receptors in your gut. If you've ever taken the Vicodin from your dentist, sometimes it backs you up a little bit. So that's why it makes a great anti-diarrheal. So people have overdosed on Imodium. People sometimes will take this drug to get high. It takes a lot of it, and it's not healthy at all, very dangerous. You may never, you move your bowels again. So I don't recommend this, but just explaining how the different opioid receptors work in your body. So most opioids, the way they work is they're opioid agonist. And that means they interact, they grab on, they massage, they tickle, they interact with the opioid receptors, mainly in your brain. Let's stick to that for now. And that's how it works. They glom on, they do their thing, and that's how you get the effects of the opioids that you're taking. To counter that, we talk about something that is like Narcan, which is an opioid antagonist. And what that means is it kicks every opioid off of your opioid receptors and prevents anything from getting back on there. Basically just keeps knocking off any opioid that you try to put in your body until your body passes the antagonist. I don't know if you've ever given anyone who is overdosing Narcan, but they wake up very angry, oftentimes not just because you've ruined their high, for example, but because now they have all of these opioid sensors in their body and brain that are untethered. They go into what's called precipitated withdrawal. They're immediately experiencing their withdrawal symptoms. So yeah, you don't expect somebody to thank you if you give them Narcan, even though you just saved their life. Let's put that out there. So back to the subject at hand, the interesting thing about Kratom is this opioid is actually a partial agonist. So that means, yes, it'll grab onto your opioid receptors, but it's a much looser attachment. This typically is turning out that it has basically lower potential for withdrawal, lower potential for addiction. Now, not none, but certainly much lower. And keep in mind, when science is working on these things, they've been trying for the dawn of humanity to try and find a pain reliever. Since we scraped bark off, I forget which tree that is, and made aspirin, since we first pierced the outside of a poppy flower, and we're trying to find a pain reliever that's not going to make somebody an addict or otherwise have them have such terrible side effects they'd rather live with the pain. So that's why this is so interesting. It has less potential for all the negative side effects that we normally discuss with opiates with. Again, not at all, but much less. And the other thing that's key in this is Kratom as an opioid does not recruit beta-arrestin. So beta-arrestin is a protein that's created when you take opioids, and that is the one most commonly associated with respiratory depression. When somebody dies or overdoses on opioids, not necessarily dies, but basically they stop breathing. That's because this beta-arrestin that the body creates as a protein. So because Kratom does not recruit this beta-arrestin in the metabolization process, it also has a lower risk of danger from use. So far, they're finding that there is especially potential for treating alcohol use disorder and other opioid withdrawal. In fact, opioid withdrawal is probably the most commonly used, most common reason that people are using opioids. So if you are, let's say, a street opioid user, or you're addicted to oxycodone and you can't get your drug of choice, there is definitely enough opioids in Kratom that it will stop the withdrawal symptoms. It may not be enough for them to get the high that they're hoping to get from their drug of choice, but it certainly is enough to keep the withdrawal at bay until they can find that oxy, until they can find that fentanyl, whatever it might be that they're hoping to find to actually get their high. That's definitely more than anything what we're hearing about it. And then second most is probably people who were taking opioids to manage pain and then just decided, I can't live like this, and decide to try something a little more mild. Maybe CBD didn't work for them, so they try something like this. But as you can see, the rise in Kratom usage from this chart goes from 2014 to 2022, basically. It rose a lot. We went from 500,000 users in 2014 to coming up on 4 million users in 2024. And it's been a steady trend upwards since the very start. So there's definitely, as word gets around, as it gets more popular, we're seeing a lot more use. Obviously, that's going to happen. And then lastly, I wanted to take a minute to talk about, well, not lastly, but second to lastly, something like that. Nextly, I wanted to talk about the legal status. By the way, this is another one of these sub-subjects that I could give you hours on, the legality and the legal status of Kratom. But to give you an idea, if you go to the left pane, you'll see a button called Handouts. And on there, I've given a link, and it'll be on our recording when we post it as well, a link to, it's called the Summary of State Laws regarding Kratom. And it's an 89-page document that was created by the Legislative Analysis and Public Policy Association. So this is 89-page of just describing this that I'm trying to show you in one slide in 4 minutes. So there's a lot more to it than what I provided. So again, this is one of those great opportunities for you to say, you know what, Eric, I do want to spend an hour with you talking about the legality of Kratom. Great. Call me, call your consultant. Let's schedule it. I'd love to spend the time with you. So keep that in mind. So this map is interesting. It kind of breaks down while it is illegal federally, the U.S. government has not stepped in to try and curb it yet. There was a Kratom Consumer Protection Act that was proposed in the beginning of 2024. It's still in proposal section. It hasn't really gotten anywhere. But they're saying, hey, if you're not going to outright ban this as a dangerous substance and add it to the DEA drug schedule, then we need to somehow regulate this. Like when I talked about the concentrates, at least regulate it. So if it says it's 5x, let's make sure it is 5x. If you're not going to ban it outright, try to make it as safe as possible. Well, a lot of states, a lot of counties, a lot of cities, they don't have the patience for that. They'd rather, because they're smaller and they'd rather react quickly, get rid of it so they don't have to worry about possible side effects until the Fed decides what the heck they're going to do with it, until they make up their mind, basically. But it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of silly. Let's take Florida example. Perfect example, because that's where I am. You'll see Florida has one pin in Tampa, Florida, on the West Coast, central West Coast there. That's Tampa, Florida, which is Hillsborough County. So this is a county of 1.5 million people in a state of almost 23 million people that is not allowed to buy, sell, use, or possess Kratom. They could drive, 10 minutes down the road just out of that county and get it. I mean, it's like counties that are dry, selling alcohol. The first liquor store on the other side of the county line has a mob scene on Sunday morning or whatever it might be. So I see why they want to do this. They don't want to have any responsibility for something that could go wrong. They could say, hey, we banned it. We were being careful. We were being safe. We banned it. And it makes perfect sense. It just goes to show how slow the federal government, as such a large entity as it is, how slow they can be to react. But on the other side, that it's not entirely their fault. There was so much outcry from the public when the FDA went to ban it. I think it was 2019 that they decided to step back and hold off on doing anything. And it wasn't even until 2024 that we have the first attempt at action in trying to at least regulate the safety of Kratom. Just one of those downsides to such a large federal government, unfortunately. And then lastly, testing methods. So right now we only have testing that is testing in urine, no saliva test yet. There is no sweat patch test. There is no hair test for it. But right now we have it available as a single panel urine dip card. And we also have it as part of our 16 panel 1608, where it's one of the other 16 drugs or one of the other 15 drugs that are on the same cup. So if you've got Kratom issues and you do, and you want to test everybody in your program every time for Kratom, just have it in the cup, have it built in. You don't have to worry about thinking about each time if I need to test this person for Kratom or if I don't need to test this person for Kratom. So if you have questions about this, again, reach out to me, reach out to your consultant. And that is the most important thing. Get in touch with us. You have a question, even if you think it's a stupid question. I don't believe in stupid questions. I really am here to answer questions. If you guys never had questions, I'd probably be out of a job. So yeah, absolutely reach out to me with questions, even if you don't, even if it's unrelated to this or any other subject that we've discussed. All right, speaking of questions, I see we have our first question up here. Sorry, my camera blocks the question bar. No. What is the cutoff and what is the window of detection? Ronald, always with the good questions. So the cutoff level for the for the Kratom instant test is 250 nanograms per milliliter. And we're seeing the window of detection about 5 days, but there are some possibilities that we're seeing of a little bit longer detection. If somebody's been a chronic user, every day for years, that kind of thing. A lot of times, even though it doesn't build up like THC would, it still takes a lot longer to completely eliminate it from your body. And, do we have time? Yeah, we've got time. I'll try to be quick about this. Real quick, just interesting tidbit on window of detection. Sorry, Jerry, I'll get to you next. Real quick, interesting thing on window of detection. So we talk about window of detection in time, and that's mostly accurate, but there's a lot of other factors involved. For example, I did a blog probably 5 years ago now. I went out and ate poppy seeds. And I had a poppy bagel, poppy muffin, whatever. I wanted to see how long the opioids would be detected in my urine. As we all saw the Seinfeld episode. So I did some testing. So in one instance, what I really made me realize, because I was positive before I went to bed, and then I was negative the next morning on my first void when I got up, but I realized I got up twice in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I'm an old man, happens. And I guarantee if I had stayed in bed all night and just voided first thing in the morning, it still would have been positive. So it's not always, and did I just add another day to my window of detection? Really I did. So it's not always just about the day. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about window. There's other factors involved too. Always check the creatinine value, et cetera, et cetera. Jerry, no, we have not seen any cross-reactivity yet. I have seen a couple of our specimen come back from the lab negative, but I never heard from the person that sent it in to know if it was positive on the instant or it was another reason they were asking to confirm it. John, is there any treatment for kratom addiction, i.e. MAT? I tend to stay away from treatment questions because it really is not my wheelhouse. I don't want to call it my assumption, but it's my limited knowledge. Theory would be that it could be treated like any other opioid, even if the withdrawal is much more subtle. Would bupe or methadone treatment still work for them? I imagine it would, because it is still an opioid. It still has the same side effects. Rebecca may have answered John's question. If kratom is now being used as an MAT option. Interesting. See, the one thing I've always heard complaints about regarding, let's say, Suboxone treatment is they don't really give a path for titration below a certain, below a certain level. So people who are using it have a pretty large ledge to jump off of when they're done. Even the manufacturer says, don't split these films in half because we can't guarantee you there's the same amount of medicine on the left as there is on the right. So I think, just from what I've read, that kratom seems like it would be a better option as an MAT, and not treating kratom with an MAT. But kratom would be good as an MET because you could really titrate that dosage much more granularly. And again, I'm not a treatment expert. It's not my wheelhouse, but this is just me thinking about what I've read and what I know about other substances that we deal with in a similar manner. Sandra, yes, and I'll have this note. So I will send you a copy to the email address that you registered with. Sherry, if you're taking kratom, will you test positive for opioids? No. The thing is, on the opiate test, it really is only for the naturally occurring opiates: codeine, morphine, maybe a little reactivity from thebaine, maybe a little reactivity from hydrocodone. Just like fentanyl isn't going to be detected on an opiate test, just like methadone is not going to be detected on an opiate test, tramadol, all these other million opioids that we see in our life today. It's very specific to the chemical in that regard, that, an opioid test is going to detect, an opiate test is going to test an opiate, which would be codeine, morphine, thebaine. All right, great. Listen, thank you all so much. I went a little bit longer than I usually do, which is fine. I didn't see anybody leaving on me, so that's good. If you, again, any questions, please reach out. That's what I live for. I'm here for you guys. Thank you so much for your time. And until next time, keep on testing.